Blake, I want to follow up with some of the comments that you made earlier. You mentioned accelerating opportunity and what your state is doing there, as did Brian. And you talked about CTE faculty and adult ed faculty partnering through an iBest-like model. Tell me more about how you're scaling that and what kind of progress Kansas is making in that effort.
Sure, and I think with the iBest model, you know, what you hear is how do we afford two instructors in the same classroom?
Exactly.
And really that's, we ask all of those questions. And you know, as I think about Brian's comments on braided funding, what really braided funding has us do is really look at how are we spending our money now in different agencies? And perhaps there's ways to target those resources towards a common goal that really makes sense for our students. And that's really what braided funding has done, those conversations, because we really can't do it alone. And you can't scale a model that has two instructors in the same classroom really very easily without a great deal of partnership. So we've been, since the Accelerating Opportunity Initiative began, in just a short time, we've really looked at how we think one component of scale is not only how many colleges you have participating and perhaps how many career pathway opportunities there are for students, but really just how many people are enrolled. How many people are in these programs and taking advantage of these programs. Kansas is a relatively small state. We have about 2.8 million people. Right now we have about 1,000, little over 1,000, about 1,100 people enrolled in the Accelerating Opportunity Initiative. So we think we've made great progress. As a contrast, you know, Washington State would have about 6.8 million people, would have 3,000 people in their iBest program, so about 3 times as large. But they've been at it for 8 years. Now, one thing we've learned is Washington State has given us tremendous technical assistance, so we can kind of stand on their shoulders and maybe not, you know, hopefully we avoid some of the early pitfalls.
Leverage their lessons learned.
Yeah, leverage their lessons learned as we move forward. But really, our model, obviously the ability to benefit through federal financial aid, if that comes back, that will be really a great piece that helps us to scale. But really, our model is going to be based on braided funding. So as you look to your agencies that might have temporary assistance for needy families, those types of programs. Many times those can help adults with supports and really give them the tools to be able to participate in these programs.
And you raise a good point, because at the federal level there was also a joint agreement between HHS, the Department of Labor, and Education to do exactly that, to help both at the federal levels and then feeding down to the state levels, is to align and ensure that we all are in sync, and we're supporting the people who along the line that really need these different career pathway initiatives to be really supporting each other.
Yeah, and I think that's very important. That came to pass, I guess, a little bit over a year ago, and I think it's been very significant, that guidance that came out in April 2012 to really show to the states that the agencies are working together, and they want that to be happening at the local level too, and really to give them a boost in the right direction to say, yeah, partnerships are going to be key to this effort going forward, and we think Career Pathways is really showing some promise. So very critical.
Yeah, I think if I can jump on here too, that the notion of in braided funding of that common goal is really a critical piece as you think about braided funding. Because one of the misconceptions with braided funding, and I think one of the things that scares people about it, is that you're paying for each other's services. And that's absolutely not the case. I mean, in fact, of course, that's against the law. You can't do things, you know, that you're not allowed to do. But by focusing on that idea of a common goal, and looking at what your different funding sources, TANF, WIA, Title I, Perkins, Adult Ed, you know, the list goes on, and how they do intersect, and figuring out how to support students. I mean, it's absolutely essential to make this initiative work and in the current climate. So I think that was a great point, Blake.
Yeah, and just as an example of that, as we've looked within our programs, okay, so we look at it as not only braided funding, but braided effort, you know, because we're trying to get to the same goal, you know, with our WIA partners and with our secondary partners. So we looked at all of our post-secondary traditional programs in career and technical education. So those legacy programs that we've had for many, many years, and they're in all states, automotive technology and collision repair and welding and nursing. And as we looked at those, we said, you hear many times, well, we don't have any money. Well, we do have some money. Obviously, there's some dollars going to, we usually mean we don't have any new money. So as we looked at those, we said, how can we make these more efficient and really serve adult learners in a better way? And the needs of the business community, which is our ultimate customer. So what we did is we took committees of business leaders, and they looked at the programs, and they really refashioned those to look more like a career pathways framework. So they took those programs and they started to identify where would there be value-added exit points. So traditionally, you might see in education, we're kind of set up on an agrarian calendar. So they looked at those and said, in welding, if a student completes this industry-recognized certificate that might be about 12 credit hours, that's a place where that individual could exit into the workforce. And then an additional value-added exit point might be at the semester, if you will, and it might build upon that first stackable credentials. And then finally, a student might receive an associate in applied science degree and have an additional industry-recognized credential. And really then, individuals that can come in a program, they can elect to stop out of a program and go to work. They sometimes continue to work and come back and take courses in the evening, if you will. Many times they're scholarshiped by that business. And so that's just one example of, as we've looked at our efforts, is how can we really make those serve adults in a better way.
That's great. Like you mentioned earlier, the importance of partnerships, the structure of those relationships and sustaining them long term. How have you brought employers to the table and sustained their involvement?
Employer involvement is critical. And I would say that if we had said, what is the most important change in Kansas and what is driving this really, and that's the employer community and business leaders. And really that is our ultimate goal out of all of this effort, is for adults to have a family-sustaining job at the end of this, and also for the economic development needs of the state so our states can grow. Because without a skilled workforce, that's one of the major components that keep businesses competitive. So what we've done is we've listened to business, again, as I said through this program alignment initiative, as they've looked at our programs, we've really listened, and when they have made suggestions, we've taken those suggestions and actually made change. I think sometimes, all of our career technical education programs have had advisory committees for a number of years. We have to be very cautious that those don't turn into a report out time and it's a great time to get, and really change doesn't happen. But really, if you engage the business community and their voice is heard, they will continue to be at the table.
I think excellent points, excellent points. Brian, you talked about the significant role of CTE in adult career pathways in Illinois. How are adult career pathways being scaled across the state?
Well, I mentioned a couple of those ways. As I said, we're participating in the Accelerating Opportunity Initiative. But Illinois has taken it upon itself to expand that, which is something that we're funding through partnerships with adult ed and career and technical education. And we have currently about 6 colleges that are engaged in basically replicating the AO work. It's not exact, and they don't have, for example, in AO they have a requirement of 2 programs, and in an R model it's 1. So there's little things like that that are different. And we're expanding that. I mean, we're actually looking now to add 4 to 6 colleges this year. And, you know, that's kind of the pilot approach, but one of the things, because Illinois is such a local control state, I mean, it's just very important that we roll it out incrementally.
Sure.
I mean, we can't just, well, we can pass legislation. We have plenty of legislation, but I mean, ultimately, change in Illinois happens at the local level.
Sure.
And so, you know, we're putting out small money, you know, so not big, you know, money grants to incent change in this regard. And then again, I mentioned the Transition Academy. And we're also expanding the Transition Academy, inviting more partners in to be trained on team teaching, on contextualized instruction, on those sorts of things. And then I should mention that through the Adult Education Division, they actually have a strategic plan that they put in place a few years ago, which requires all adult education providers to move to bridge programs. And so that first building block of integrated instruction is or should be in place in Illinois across about 100 programs. You know, this year, next year, you know, certainly in that way. So there's a number of different things that are happening as far as scaling adult career pathways. You know, one of the critical components of all of this, though, I have to mention is you have to bring your career and technical educators into it from the beginning. It can't be an initiative or an approach that is done to them, if you will. You know, you can't do we're going to do all the groundwork and lay the foundation and then invite them to come over. You know, you certainly have to include them in this work, and we've done that pretty well in Illinois. We've tried, at least.
I think that's a great point. You've also mentioned the importance of professional development in all of your efforts earlier. Tell me a little bit more about what you're doing to support your faculty and your staff.
Sure. Well, we have an extensive professional development system in Illinois through the adult education side of the house, if you will. We've got 4 professional development centers. Through career and technical education, we contract with one professional development center that runs what we call the regional network system.
Okay.
And so we have the state divided in regions, and then so any professional development that we deliver is available in career technical education in any of the regions. Sometimes we do 4, sometimes we bring them together. And we have, a big change in the last year is we've put these 2 together. It kind of puts, your stepbrothers in a room together and say, work it out. You know, we've put these folks together, and they've actually are co-leading that Transition Academy that I mentioned.
That's fantastic.
Are doing a lot of joint professional development. And I think in a lot of ways are working to explain one system to the other. I mean, and I think that's very much a foundation of what you kind of have to do, including developing some common language.
Very important as well, for sure, that common terminology. We are just about ready now to take some questions from our audience and from our viewers participating online. Just a reminder for members here in our live audience, if you have a question, just jot those down on your card and raise those up, and someone from our project team will come by and pick those up from you. For our virtual audience, remember you can tweet your questions to #CareerPathways.